Okay, let me get Brian's intro here or bio. And I know many of you know Brian, and he has helped so many of us on our journeys. He's authentic and generous, and we just appreciate him spending time with us tonight. Um, Brian Smith is a shining light parent, grief guide, author, podcast host, and inspirational speaker. Brian's profound journey into grief guidance and spiritual exploration began with the sudden passing of his beloved daughter Shayna at the age of 15. This pivotal moment not only propelled Brian into a deep exploration of the nature of life and death, but also instilled in him a resilient spirit to support others navigating similar paths of loss and transformation. His experiences have enabled him to speak authentically to both grief and religious trauma, offering a compassionate space for those grappling with these complex challenges. A seasoned speaker, Brian has channeled his insights into his role as a grief guide, his award winning podcast, Grief to Growth, and his impactful book, Grief to Growth Planted, Not Buried. He serves as a volunteer leader with Helping Parents Heal and has been a distinguished speaker at the International Association for Near Death Studies, furthering his commitment to understanding life beyond the physical. Brian's podcast has been recognized with 2 Positive Change Awards in the categories of spiritual and personal transformation, underscoring his ability to influence and inspire positive change in the lives of his listeners. And we'll put Brian's website in the chat, but it is grieftogrowth.com. And Brian, we just so appreciate you joining us tonight to share your just the tools that have helped you and so many others. Thank you. We'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Ann. Thanks. That was a great introduction. That sounded pretty impressive. I guess I've done a lot of stuff. Um, yeah, it's why we were talking before we got started, and it's been 10 years now since my daughter passed away. It was 10 years ago in June of this year, June 24th, actually. And I don't know where you guys all are in your journeys. I'm sure you're in different places, different amounts of time, et cetera. But I remember back to those early days, and there were times when I didn't think I'd ever be able to make it for 10 years. I didn't think I'd be able to make it for 10 days. So I want to encourage you wherever you are in your journey that it does get better. It will get better. The great thing about helping parents heal is there's always people to look forward to. When I joined the organization, I think we were about a couple thousand people. I think we're close to 30,000, I guess, at this point. But Elizabeth Blassan and Mark Ireland were examples for me, and I followed in their footprints. So I'm really glad to be doing this work now. And I want to tell you before I get started with tools. I mean, first of all, some of you probably know who I am, but let's talk about how I got here. And Anne mentioned that my journey started when my daughter passed away, and which is a very pivotal point in my life, but it's not actually where it started. She also mentioned religious trauma. My grandfather was the pastor of my church. I grew up in a very fundamentalist Christian church, Pentecostal, for those of you familiar with that. Fire and brimstone, heaven and hell, the whole deal. And I developed a very severe fear of death. When I was a child, I just knew I was going to die suddenly. I knew I wasn't going to grow up to be an adult, and I feared what would happen to me when I died. I feared that I would go to hell. So I started having panic attacks when I was in my teens, and it's really kind of wild as I look back on it now. I was probably about Shayna's age when she passed when I started having these panic attacks, thinking that I was going to die. And I wonder now sometimes if that was a premonition of what happened to her, because she did pass suddenly when she was 15. But having that fear and having the kind of mind that I have, I'm a very left brain person. I'm a very analytical person. When I was a kid, I had to take things apart to see how they worked. Sometimes I got in trouble for that because I took apart things that were working and I couldn't get them back together. But I wanted to know what made things tick. How did things work? So when I had this fear, this thanatophobia, this really terrible fear of death, I was like, let me see if I can understand, where this is coming from. So I studied everything I get my hands on when it comes to the afterlife, to death. I said I was raised Christian, but I was always the kind of person I'm like, what if I'd been born in India? I'd be a Hindu. Or if I'd been born in China, I'd be, who knows? So I knew that being a Christian was really kind of an accident of birth. So I thought, what if I look at other religions and see what they have to say? So I studied Kabbalah, I studied Islam a little bit, I studied Buddhism, Taoism, I read other spiritual texts, and I wanted to see what do these things have in common. What I found out was they have a lot in common, much more than I was taught when I was taught about Christianity, which was so really an exclusive one-way path to God or to spirituality. So studying all that and learning all that, and then also scientific approach to it and philosophical. So I would just go. This is back before we had the internet. This was back before there was Amazon. I'd go to the bookstore, and I realized now I was trusting my intuition. I had no idea what that meant at the time, but I would just go in the spirituality section. I'd look at a book, and I'd like, I'm going to buy this one. So I started buying books on spirituality. One of the first ones I bought was The Afterlife Experiments by Dr. Gary Schwartz. And if you're not familiar with Gary, Gary works, just retired from the University of Arizona. And Gary was bringing mediums into the lab and studying them. And this appealed to my engineer brain. So I started reading these studies and I'm like, this is real. This mediumship is, he's got studies and they're blinded, the medium never met the sitter, et cetera, et cetera. So fast forward now 20, I don't know how many years, 25 years at least. And actually, I've worked with Gary on the Soul Phone project, so it kind of shows you how things come around. And actually, got to introduce Gary at the last Helping Parents Heal conference. So I started studying all this stuff. Again, philosophy, other religions, reading about near-death experiences, reading about afterlife communications. And what I realized is there is a huge body of evidence that says that our consciousness survives the death of our body. And I people ask me now, well, do you really believe what you're talking about? The answer is I don't so much believe it as that I know it. As much as we know pretty much anything. Science doesn't actually prove things. Mathematicians prove things. Science actually comes to the most logical conclusion. And I can say without a doubt that the most logical conclusion is that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. So when you're a part of helping parents heal, you're gonna hear this a lot. And there's this tendency for people that are outside to call us woo woo, to say that we're just wishful thinking, that we're ignoring the evidence. And I'm here to tell you that nothing can be farther from the truth. If anyone says to me that I'm ignoring the evidence, I mean, this is what I do like pretty much all day long, every day, is I'm looking at the evidence. And so what I do sometimes with like my clients, they're like, I want to believe, I want to understand. So help me with resources, help me to understand how I can believe this. So I do have a podcast. I've done about, I think 400 episodes now, about 450 episodes. So I talk to people all the time who have, again, had these experiences, who have studied these experiences. So that has helped me to form the opinions that I have now. And again, I don't even like the term opinion. It's more of like it's been proven as much as it can be. So in the court of law, right, you you prove something beyond a reasonable doubt. So there's a couple standards of proof, but in a criminal case, it's beyond a reasonable doubt. And I would argue that we have shown that the afterlife exists beyond any reasonable doubt. When I hear materialists come up with explanations, other explanations, they're fantastical. Well, there's an infinite number of universes, and we just happen to live in the one that produced life. It's just because the universe is so fine tuned that if anything was off just a little bit, life as we know it wouldn't even exist. So, near death experiences, the most logical, simplest explanation for someone who says, I had an experience, I left my body, I saw my relatives, I saw my loved ones, I saw people back here, what they were doing at the time that I was dead and they were in a different state. The most logical explanation, the simplest explanation for that is that they left their body. But you'll hear materialists say, well, it's just a hallucination. It's because of a lack of oxygen to the brain. Well, lack of oxygen does produce hallucinations, but they're not vivid, they're not lucid, they're more disjointed. People that have near death experiences, for example, they come back, they're changed. They're changed sometimes physically. They're definitely changed spiritually. They change their lives. So again, just this is just a little bit evidence for what we're talking about today. So well, I want to shift gears a little bit here and let's talk about grief. We're here, all of us have experienced grief. That's why we're here. We're together, and we talk in helping parents heal. There's the word heal, and we're talking about spiritual tools for healing tonight. And the longer I do this and the more I experience this, I kind of push back on the word heal a little bit. And I want to explain to you why, because there's a couple things going on when we're in grief. Grief itself is because we love the person who has crossed over, because we have a perceived loss. So that missing, I've heard grief described as love with no place to go. So that's grief itself. And grief is not, I would say, an emotion. It's more of a process. It's a process that we go through. And frankly, I think it's a process we're all going to probably live with for the remainder of our time here, especially when it comes to a child, crossing over. But there are these attendant emotions, these parasitic emotions that have been described as, that come along with the grief. And that can be, profound sadness. That could be guilt. That could be anger. That could be shame. That could be a whole host of emotions that come along with the grief. Those are the things that we want to heal, so to speak. We want to resolve those things. We want to process them. So when we talk about healing, when I work with clients, one of the things I'll say is like, let's talk about what other emotions are you having? What emotions are you having? And a big one is guilt. It's almost universal. In fact, I don't think I've talked to a parent yet who didn't feel some level of guilt at some point about their child's passing. And this could be whether they passed of a drug overdose, suicide, an accident, cancer, whatever, you name it. As parents, a lot of times we take responsibility for our children. We feel like, it's our job to keep them safe. And I felt that way with my daughter, Shayna. And when they pass, we will sometimes find a way to blame ourselves. So I want to say to you tonight, if you're listening to me and you're feeling any amount of guilt, I want to say, first of all, it's very common. You might feel like it's unique to you, but it's almost universal. The other thing I want to say to you is I don't believe any emotion is a bad emotion or a negative emotion. All of our emotions are here to teach us something. All of our emotions are here to tell us something. And even an emotion like guilt, it thinks it's protecting us. So the way to look at emotions, I think a very helpful way is there's something called internal family systems, or another thing I've taught is positive intelligence. And what this does is it basically divides our persona up into parts. And so when we think about something like your guilt, it sometimes helps to personify your guilt. And so you actually will talk to your guilt like, okay, what are you saying to me? And your guilt is actually trying to protect you, because what your guilt is doing is it's giving you a sense of control. What it's saying to you is, if you had done this, or if you hadn't done that, then they would still be here. Therefore, in the future, if you just make all the right decisions, then everything will work out fine. Now, that gives us a sense of control, which is soothing, right? In a sense, but it does it at the cost of our peace, because what it tells us is that we screwed up in the past and it's our fault that our child's not here anymore. And again, nothing could be further from the truth. There are several things I want to say about that. First of all, I happen to believe in soul planning. I believe that we plan our lifetimes together as a team before we come in. And I don't believe anybody leaves when it's not their quote appointed time. So I don't think there's anything that we can do to keep someone from leaving when it's their time or to hurry that time along. The other thing is, every parent that I've ever spoken with has done the best they could with what they knew at the time. And that's all, that's the only standard you can hold yourself to. You know, hindsight is 2020. And we'll say things, and I've had parents say this to me. If I just hadn't let her go to breakfast with her boyfriend, she'd still be alive. If I just hadn't let him walk to the park, if I just checked in the room one more time that night before I went to bed, then he wouldn't have overdosed on the drugs or wouldn't have taken his life. It's a very unreasonable standard to hold yourself to. And so what I want to say to you, and one of the tools I give people is, again, sit down with your guilt, talk to your guilt, ask it what it's trying to say to you, and then answer it from your own higher self. Because the guilt is a part of you, but there's another part of you that's your higher self. And your higher self is in positive intelligence, we call it your sage. That's the part of you that knows the truth. And so answer that from the true part of yourself. And it can be helpful also to do an exercise was pretend like you're your best friend. If your best friend came to you and said, "My daughter took her life," for example, and it's my fault, would you say, "You're right, it's your fault"? No, you would never say that to anybody. You would say, "Of course it's not your fault." So try to speak to yourself with the same compassion that you speak to your best friend with, because you are your best friend. You are the one person that's going to be a constant in your life from the time you came onto this planet to the time you leave. So why not speak kindly to yourself? Another tool I like to give to people is, there's a test I use when I'm entertaining a thought, and that is it helpful and is it true? First test, is this thought really true, or is it just a belief? Is it just an opinion, or is it an objective fact? Most of the time when we're feeling guilt, it's not an objective fact. I didn't spend enough time with them before they passed away. That's subjective. The objective fact is you spent X amount of time. Whether it was enough time or not, that is subjective. So we are human beings. We seek meaning. We want meaning. We want to place blame, whether it's on ourselves or somebody else. And I'm here to tell you, the blame game doesn't lead anywhere good. So when I'm having a thought that's not helpful, I will like, "You're not helpful. I don't need this thought here." When my daughter Shayna passed, Shayna had rheumatoid arthritis and she was on some very powerful medications. Excuse me. And I had to administer these medications to her. I gave her pills once a week and I gave her an injection once every other week. And when she passed, I thought, well, maybe this was a side effect of one of the medications she was on. So my mind was telling me, go look up all the side effects. You should go look up the side effects and see if this is your fault. Maybe you shouldn't have given her those. But then the other side of me said, wait a minute. I didn't go to medical school. Her rheumatologist went to medical school. Her cardiologist went to medical school. It's not my job to be a doctor. It's my job to follow the doctor's advice as best I can. And we did everything we could do for Shayna. We took her to all her appointments. We did proactive stuff. And I just said to myself, I'm not going to entertain these thoughts because they're not helpful. They're not going to bring her back. They're not going to change anything that's past. So why would I do this to myself? So again, that's an example. Your examples are all different, but if you're entertaining those thoughts, I'd ask you to show them to the door. So we can't control our thoughts. Thoughts are going to come into our head and they're just going to come. But what we can do is we can decide whether we're going to let them stay or not. So I look at my thoughts as like, you're a guest. You're a guest in my house. So say someone comes and knocks on my door and I open the door. They can push their way in, but I can ask them to leave. And that's what I do with thoughts that I find that are not helpful. And so we'll talk about some tools in a little bit, and I'll tell you some techniques to start to, first of all, recognize these thoughts, to recognize there are these parts of you that they're not here to hurt you. We're not here to fight them. We're not here to wrestle them into submission. We're not here to kill the ego or any of that stuff, but to say, okay, you're not really being helpful right now. I understand that you're trying to help out, but you're just not helping. So I'm going to have to ask you to tone it down and do what it does to make you feel safe, to make you feel heard. But I'm not going to I'm not going to entertain this thought because it's not helping me and it's not helping you. I was listening to something earlier today. This is kind of related, but I was listening to someone talking about like when you have cancer. When you have cancer, there's a part of you that's out of control. There's a part of you that is like it's lost contact with your body and it's saying, I've got to grow, I've got to grow, I've got to grow. And this guy was I was listening to it saying, if I get cancer, he didn't have cancer. He said, but I'm not gonna treat it like the enemy. I'm gonna treat it like you're I understand what you're trying to do here, but you're not helping. And if you keep going, you're gonna kill both of us. So I'm gonna have to ask you to stop. That's the same thing with these thoughts that come into our minds. You know, they're not here to hurt us. They're confused. There are parts of us that got stuck in the past. There are our 5-year-old self, our 8-year-old self, the part of us that got hurt by, something a long, long time ago. And that part's saying, look, I'm here to keep you safe. And we just want to kind of tell them, let's just kind of calm it down here a little bit. I see some questions going on in the chat. Let me just take a look real quick.
Yep.
Oh, when it comes to suicide, okay. I'm just, a lot of what I'm going to give you tonight is my opinion. Now, when I say opinion, I really consider more of a conclusion because an opinion is just something that's just an offhanded, like I think this, I like ice cream. I'm going to give you the conclusion that I've come to after studying it for a long time. So I know there are people that say suicide is never part of the plan. As a person who likes to think logically, I'm like, why would everything else be a part of the plan, but suicide can never be part of the plan? A drug overdose could be part of the plan. An accident could be part of the plan. Cancer could be part of the plan, but never suicide. And I think people say this with good intentions because we want to encourage people to not take their own lives. And I understand the motivation behind that. But I don't believe too much in absolutes. So I know for me, for example, suicide's not part of my plan, but I would never say it's not part of someone else's plan. Um, so that's just a conclusion that I've come to. There's a lot of shame and blame that goes along with suicide. We blame the person who has taken their life. We blame people. We blame ourselves for not realizing they were going to do it. And I'm here to eliminate as much shame and as much blame as I possibly can. So, and when it comes to suicide, let's assume it's not part of the plan. This earth it's a hard place to live in. And I believe we make life plans and sometimes we might be a little bit too ambitious. And maybe someone gets to the point where it's like I bit off more than I can chew and they decide to go home early. I'm not here to judge that person for that. That's just me. I can't judge people for that. Let's see. Um, yeah, why didn't I see? Why didn't I know? Mary, I interviewed a woman for my podcast. I can't think of her name right now, but I'll try to remember it later on. And her son was suicidal, and she knew it. Her son was in college. She knew he was suicidal. She was getting him counseling. She went to visit him. She did everything she possibly could, and he ended up taking his life anyway. Excuse me. We are not omniscient. We are not omnipotent, and we are not omnipresent. That means we don't know everything. We don't have all power, and we can't be everywhere all the time. So even if we were to spot the fact that someone's suicidal and get them help and do everything we can do, we can never guarantee the outcome of what that person's going to do. Everybody has free will. So the self blame is, again, I want to tell you, it's very, very common, but it's not very helpful. And I was talking to someone earlier today who had a premonition that their son was going to pass, and it wasn't suicide, but they just had this premonition. They just had this feeling for like a long time, and they were like, "Well, maybe I feel a little bit of guilt because I had this premonition and I didn't stop it." And I'm like, well, could you stop everything? Because you didn't know how it was going to happen. You didn't know when it was going to happen. You can't bubble wrap your kid up and put them in their room and never let them leave. And even if you did, my daughter was down the hallway from me when she passed away. So it's even if you know that idea that if I'd known I could have done something to stop it, I don't know. I think probably not. Yeah, Betsy Stevenson. That's who it was. Yes. Um, so yeah, again, we want definite answers for things. Is suicide part of the plan or not? I, again, frankly, in 3 words, I don't know. But when people tell me it can never be part of the plan, I do question that. And I'm just saying, maybe you want to question that. Again, I don't think suicide is a great idea. I think that, we're cutting our life plan here short. I don't want to come back and do this over. If you look at Earth as a school and we're here to graduate, I want to get the experiences I'm supposed to get while I'm here. So for me, like I said, it's not an option, but I just don't want to judge anybody else. Okay. And I don't want to put any more burden on a parent that believes in life planning and has gotten comfort from that and says, yeah, my daughter passed from cancer. I can take comfort that this was planned. But then another parent lost a child to suicide. And we say to them, well, you can't take comfort in that. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to take that away from them. Um, let's see. Let me look at my notes here real quick, see what else I was going to talk about. And of course, I don't have them up. Excuse me. I'll be right back.
Brian, you were going to talk about the gems, so
Yeah,
tools. Yeah.
yeah. So I've talked about my background a little bit. I just want to talk about I'm going to talk real quickly about the ways that we know things. I talked earlier about some of the evidence. There's personal experience, right? So we can experience something ourselves. A lot of you have experienced signs, synchronicities, dream visits, um, all those types of things. Don't ever deny personal experience as being important. A lot of times people will try to tell you, well, subjective experience doesn't mean anything. Subjective experience is frankly really all we have. Even when we study something in a laboratory, a scientist is studying it, he's looking at an instrument and he's reading that instrument and telling you what it says. That's a subjective experience. So I don't deny the subjective experiences, personal ones. Others' experiences. I've studied hundreds of near-death experiences at this point of view, at this point in time. I've interviewed people. I've looked them down. I've sat them in the eye. We learn things from other people's experiences all the time. So that's another body of evidence we have for anything that we know is others' experiences. Of course, there is scientific studies. Those are important. Those are great when we can study things, when we can bring them into the lab, but we can't do that with everything. Another way we can learn things is through philosophy, through logic, through what's most reasonable, through what makes sense. So there's a guy that I really admire. His name is Dr. Bernardo Kastrup. I've had him on my podcast. I've read his books. I listen to every time I can hear him. He is a computer scientist and a philosopher, and he's taken a very uh, strategic, analytic approach to understanding life and the nature of consciousness and come to a lot of the same conclusions that I have. And then the fifth way we can know things is through religion and through traditions. There is something to be said for religion. I don't practice religion myself anymore, but I believe religion can lead us a long way down the path. So talking about tools, um, I developed a framework, and I realized after 4 or 5 years of going through my own grief journey that I had been reading all these books and studying all these things, and I'm like, there are basically 4 things that I've learned that really helped me, and I put them into a framework I call GEMS, and that's GEMS. And what it stands for is gratitude, exercise, and sleep, mindfulness or meditation, and self care. So when it comes to the first one, gratitude, this I always chuckle when I say gratitude because when I first heard about gratitude practice, I thought, frankly, what a joke. How's this going to change anything? How's this going to make, my life any better? Again, I'm a very analytical person. It's not going to change the world. Um, and then we might think, well, what do I have to be grateful for? I've lost my child, but there's nothing worse than that. So when it comes to this, it it is a practice. Our brains are actually wired. We are evolved to look for what's wrong. Our brains are evolved to look for danger. If you're a caveman and you're out walking around and there's a lion running across the field, you don't want to be staring at the flower. You want to be looking at the lion that's coming at you. But unfortunately, our brains have not evolved to make us happy. And we live in a society now where 99.9% of the time, we're not in any physical danger, but our brains are still always scanning for what's wrong. So it's really easy to focus on that. So what we have to do is actually rewire our brains. We have to retrain our brains to focus on what's right. And so we're actually building neural pathways in our brains. This is why, again, the scientific reason why gratitude works. Now, some people believe the gratitude will actually change the things that happen to you. That may or may not be true. I'm not saying that it's not. But what I do know is it changes your brain and it changes your attitude. So it's a very simple thing for me. The way I practice it is first thing when I wake up in the morning is I think of three things that I'm grateful for that day. And when it first started, I first started doing this. It was just basically what we call somatic things, things with my body. I'm warm. I've got heat. I've got electricity. Um, I have food. I'm fed. It might be something as simple as that. And then later on, as the grief fog lifts a little bit, maybe you start to think of more things like I've got great friends. I still have my wife and my other daughter, great relationships. I'm going to dinner with my friends tonight. I like to walk. I walk every day. That's my my exercise. And I love, like, some days I'll just be like, I'm grateful for the fact that I can walk. That I'm 64 years old and I walk 6 miles every day. So I'm grateful for that. So it starts with gratitude, really. Because again, when you're in deep, heavy grief, you're going to be thinking of all the things that are wrong. You're going to be thinking of missing your loved one. And eventually you'll get to the point where when you think of your loved one, instead of thinking first how much you miss them, you'll be grateful for how much time you had with them, however much time that was. I only had 15 years with my daughter. And I could say, well, I only got 15 years. That's not fair. She should have lived a lot longer than that. And I could just go down that rabbit hole. Or I could say, I got 15 years with her. We had a great 15 years. We homeschooled my daughter. We spent so much time together. We went on vacations together. Shayna had complications when she was born where we didn't know if she was going to make it through birth. Um, and I'm like, maybe those 15 years were bonus. Maybe you look at it that way. So whatever the circumstances that you're in, you can find something in it to be grateful for. Again, it might be those small things. And for me, making that a daily practice has made a huge difference. And it's actually now it comes more naturally to me than it used to. I'll find myself sometimes just grateful for, the sunshine. I was talking to Ann earlier. Ann's in Colorado Springs. I'm in Ohio. I am a tropical person. I love warm weather. And this time of year, it's really easy for me to start getting depressed because the days are getting shorter. It's getting cooler. I don't like winter. But the last couple of weeks, every day I've gotten up and I'm like, I love the fact that it's 80 degrees. And people here are complaining. They're like, I'm ready for fall. I'm like, no, I love it. And my dog, Stevie, she's 12. And she'll be 12 in December. I look at her every day. Every day she gets up and I'm like, I'm grateful that she's here. So that's my gratitude practice. Exercise, I mentioned for me, it's walking. And the way I do things, I like to get it done, get it over with. So I do my gratitude first thing, then I get out of bed, put on my shoes, I walk for 6 miles. And that exercise is for my body, but it's also for my mind and for my spirit. I will listen to podcasts while I'm walking. I'll listen to books while I'm walking. So that gives me, it's about an hour and 35, hour, 40 minutes. that I'm doing a physical practice and a spiritual practice together. Then I come back to my office and I work for a while, and then I do my mindfulness. So for me, mindfulness is once or twice a day. I do 20 minutes at a time. I do a meditation technique called turning within that I learned from Kelvin Chin, but you can do any kind of mindfulness that works for you. People say to me, I can't meditate. You don't understand. My mind won't stop. My mind's always spinning. I want to tell you, first of all, meditation is not about stopping your mind. It's not about stopping your thoughts. It's really about observing. You can meditate in any way that works for you. I use an app called Insight Timer. It's free. You can download it on your phone. Um, it will keep track of how long you meditated, how many days in a row you meditated, how many sessions you've had. You can do meditate to music. You can meditate to ambient sounds like bird songs or rainforest. You can do guided meditations. You can meditate in silence. So anything that works for you. It could be gardening. It could be doing dishes. Um, I know a woman that was trying to figure out how to get over grief when her mother passed, and she started doing powerlifting. That was her meditation. She liked counting the reps. So whatever works for you, whatever form of mindfulness works for you. And then the fourth one is self care. Self care is important all the time, and we don't do enough of it. We tell ourselves, and people tell us that self care is selfish. It's absolutely not. It's essential. I look at people as rechargeable batteries. As grief drains us, grief is work, and we don't have a lot of times have energy for anything else. So it's really important that we protect our energy. It may be saying no to things. It may be like people are inviting you to something and you just say, I just can't do it today. That's fair. That's fine. It could be taking a break from work. Um, it could be asking for help. A lot of us have a lot of trouble asking for help. And when it comes to that, I saw a great meme earlier today. It was saying, be grateful for someone who asks you for something because they're giving you a chance to experience the kingdom of heaven. It's actually an honor to serve somebody. And if you don't ask for help, you're actually denying someone else a chance to serve you. So when your friends say, what can I do for you? And this is a tricky thing because you don't know, right? You don't know what they can do for you. So if you're on the other side, offer something specific to someone. Can I can I do your dishes for you? Can I do your grocery shopping for you? Can I cut your grass? Can I watch your children? Whatever it is. But if you're the person that's grieving and someone wants to do something for you, let them. Okay? It's going to help you and it's actually going to bless them as well. So it's not really that gracious to turn people down all the time, I guess is what I'm saying. Just let people love on you. Let people help you. So that's the GEMS framework. You can go to my store. That's grief2growth.com/store. And there's a free version of it there. I've also written a book. It's called Gems of Healing. It's a little bit more detailed. That gives you the science behind it and all that stuff. But I highly recommend that start off with one thing. Don't try to do everything at once, but start with one practice and say, I'm going to start doing this. I'm going to start doing mindfulness 5 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day. I'm going to take a walk 5 minutes after dinner or 10 minutes after dinner. I'm going to do a gratitude practice when I'm in the shower in the morning or when I wake up in the morning. So build on it slowly and make it a practice. And I guarantee these habits will um, not only serve you when you're in grief, which I assume that most of us here are, but they'll serve you all the time. And they will help you learn to slow your thoughts down, to be less reactive and more responsive. They'll help you to again recognize these thoughts that we have that aren't helpful, and we all have them. Sometimes people think like I'm the only one that's got these voices in my head that's telling me all this crap. You're not. We all have it. It's a part of being human. Um, but what a lot of us don't realize is that it's optional whether we entertain those voices or not. Let's see. So I went through gems. I talked a little bit about, resources, and we were going to talk about resources. For me, it's been like when Shayna first passed, that's when I started listening to podcasts like crazy. Sandra Champlain's "We Don't Die" radio. I listened to. She'd been doing it for a couple of years when I found it, but I listened to every episode she put out. I listened to Roberta Grimes' "Seek Reality." I listen now to a couple others, but I find podcasts, they're free, they're helpful. I listen to them while I'm walking, so I can do other things while I'm listening to them. Excuse me. So podcasts, books, helping parents heal. We've got a lot of authors in this group. Books can be very helpful, but one of the biggest resources is community. Finding people that are like-minded, finding people that can walk alongside you. We are not meant to do this alone. Um, I think that it's just we live in a society where a lot of us feel isolated. We feel lonely, even though we're connected supposedly on social media. Find people that share your point of view, that will reinforce your point of view, that you can share signs with without them going, "Oh, that's not a sign," or a mediumship isn't real. Um, and I was talking to someone earlier today. They said, "Well, do you only surround yourself with people who think like you do?" No, I don't. I mean, I'm still in the world. I still talk to other people, but I do surround with people who think like I do. I'm immersive in those groups, helping parents heal. IANS, International Association for Near Death Studies. I go to the conferences. I go to places where we do talk woo woo because you know having this point of view is kind of like swimming upstream in our modern society. But I want to also mention this to you because as I said, I've studied this stuff a lot. Up until about 100 years ago, 200 years ago, everybody was, quote, religious. Everybody, there were no, I'm not going to say no, there were very few materialists who didn't believe in some sort of afterlife of spirituality. And what happened is people said, oh, we don't need that anymore. We've got it all figured out. We know everything. Well, again, if you start studying this analytical idealism I've talked about, look up Dr. Bernardo Kastrup and watch some of his debates. The materialists will try to convince you that they've got everything figured out. They do not. They absolutely do not. One of the things they don't have figured out is consciousness. They don't know why we even have experiences. They can't explain what consciousness is. So, being open and having that sense of curiosity and not falling into this trap that I believe mankind has set itself up for, saying there is nothing else. It's something I also find to be very important. Let me see. So I talked about some of those resources. You can follow my podcast. You can follow my Substack. Those things are free. Also, if you go to my store, it's grieftogrowth.com/store. There's some things there that are free, and there's some things there that I do charge for. Um, but avail yourself of everything that's out there and start. You know, I remember I had a really good friend. She's become a really good friend. We're friends on Facebook, and she was a hardcore atheist. And she came to me one time, and her husband had passed away, and she said, "Brian, I don't believe in mediumship. I know, but I know you're a smart person. You seem to really, really believe this." She said, "Send me to the best medium you know, because I want to prove to myself once and for all this isn't real, so I can just put this to bed." So I said, "Okay," and I gave her the name of a friend of mine who's a medium. She gave her a fake credit card, fake name. She went to her. She came back to me. She was like, "I'm blown away. This woman just blew my mind." So she said, "What else do you got for me?" So I started sending her all these books, the Afterlife Experiments, and books by Bruce Grayson, et cetera, et cetera. And she came back. She goes, "Why did I know this stuff existed? What? I'm an educated person." I said, "Because you're looking in the wrong places. Because people tell you it doesn't exist. There is a ton of information out there now. So don't let people tell you that it's not real. Don't let people tell you that that there's no reason to believe." I used to be a Christian apologist. I've had websites where I was trying to, proselytize people. I'm very good at arguing things, and now it's like I'm like, if someone says to me, "Why do you believe this?" My answer is, "How much time do you have?" Because there's so much out there. I do want to leave some time for questions. I know there's been a few in the chat. Um, I'm just trying to see if there's anything here. So what I want to do is, oh, Terilyn said there's been a lot of synchronicities happening for me. Yeah, synchronicities are wild. And the thing is, the more you open your eyes up to synchronicities, the more you'll see. And Gary Schwartz, I think, has written books about synchronicities. You can check that out. Carl Jung talks about synchronicities a lot. Um, Synchronicities is one of those things that, again, some people say, well, I don't know how it works, therefore it can't be true. Well, what I say is, I don't know how it works, but I know it's absolutely true, 100% without a doubt that synchronicities happen all the time. So again, don't be shy. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. You can ask in the chat or you can unmute yourself. Um, Jessica says, how do you feel or connect with your daughter? That is a great question. When I first started doing this work and I would interview people and people would say, oh, I have dream visits all the time, or I do automatic writing, or I do certain things. I'm like, I need to try to connect the way those people do. And then one day I was talking to someone, I was like, I was trying to work on my connection with Shayna, work on my connection with Shayna. And I realized I already have a connection with Shayna. Someone's actually said this to me in my one of my podcasts. And I'm like, yeah, Shayna, we write together. Shayna's come through mediums and said that, Dad, you're not really that great of a writer. I help you out. So we write together. You can see her picture up here behind me. That same picture's outside my bedroom door. So the first thing when I walk out the door in the morning is I say good morning to Shayna. The last thing when I take my dog out for the last time at night is I say good night to Shayna. And what I tell people now is I have another daughter, Kayla, who we're lucky she lives about 25 minutes from us. But I talk to Shayna every day. I don't talk to Kayla every day. My daughter in the physical, I don't talk to every day. I talk to Shayna more than I talk to Kayla at this point. So you can develop this relationship with your child. It's different. It's not the same. It's like a different language. It's more subtle. Um, my wife was doing a meditation, and she would get like her heart would quicken a little bit, and she'd see like purple. And she was like, wonder if that was Shayna. And one day, actually, Suzanne Giesman, she called us up and said Shayna dropped in on her. And she gave us, she always gives evidence when she does it. So she gave some evidence and she goes, well, Shayna says you have a question for me. My wife's like, no, I don't think so. And Suzanne insisted. She goes, no, you have a question for me. And my wife goes, well, when I meditate, I have this little, it's subtle. By this little, my heart quickens and I see like purple. And Shayna said, yeah, that's me. So what I encourage you to do is, with your loved one, this is where mindfulness comes in. Sit, get really quiet, think about them, and then just observe what goes on in your body. Do you feel a tickle in the top of your head, or maybe you feel something like pulling at your ear, or whatever it is, and let that be a sign that they're with you. And you have to develop that language yourself. No one else can tell you what it's going to be like for you. It's not the same for me as it is for my wife. Does she talk back? That's what I'm looking for. Yeah, Lori, she does talk back, but it's not audible. It's funny. It reminds me when I was a kid in church, and people would say to me, they always come up and say, God told me this, or God told me that. And I'm like, wow, this is crazy. God doesn't talk to me. Why is God talking to everybody but me? I don't understand what's going on. So finally I asked someone, I said, well, what do you mean God told you that? Did you hear an audible voice? Or did you hear God's voice? Well, no, it's just more like a feeling. And so your loved one, they are talking to you, but it'll be actually a lot of times it's in my voice. It's not even in Shayna's voice. Sometimes it's in Shayna's voice in my head, but sometimes it's like my own thought. So again, it's a learning, it's a discernment of figuring that out. I think studying mediumship, if you're open to it, can be helpful because I've talked to so many mediums. And again, people think mediums like sit down and they're like, they see your loved one standing in front of them, speaking to them in English. That's not the way mediumship works for most mediums. It's more like impressions, it's thoughts, it's bits of song lyrics, it's stuff like that. And I think that's how the spirit world, how our loved ones in spirit talk to us as well. So it's really getting quiet. That's where that mindfulness comes in, and asking a question. Now, there's some techniques that can help. Automatic writing. You can sit and write questions to your loved one, and then write back in their voice. Sometimes people find if they use their non-dominant hand, that makes it easier to do that. Um, but yeah, Lori, she does talk back, but maybe not in the way that, you know, not in the way that I would hear you if you were talking to me right now. Any other questions?
Brian, thank you so much. This has been so helpful, so much great information. And yes, we've got 5+ minutes. So if anybody wants to raise your virtual hand or wave your physical hand, we would love to. We've got time, and Brian is such a wealth of information. And again, Brian, just so much good information. And I think, like you were just saying to Lori, we kind of develop this spirit language,
Mhm.
and just talking out loud to our kids or talking silently to our kids, but they will, I mean, we're just going to develop this new language together. Um, but it's definitely different for everybody. I know that.
Yeah.
Being,
Lori says, I know Suzanne Giesman actually hears her stepdaughter. Um, I, I don't know if she actually hears her audibly. I don't think she actually does. Suzanne is, okay, first of all, one of the best mediums in the world. So we're probably not all going to get the level of Suzanne. But another interesting thing is when Suzanne's mother passed, Suzanne didn't hear from her mother for like, I think, over a year. And they were extremely close. So we're probably not going to have the kind of connection that mediums get with our loved ones. And I know a lot of mediums who say, I don't have the connection with my loved one like I do with your loved ones. So again, instead of trying to have other people's experiences, which I've done myself, try to develop your own. A great resource for you, a great book is Soul Smart by Suzanne Wilson. Soul Smart is great on learning how to do spirit communication.